welcome to the show. I'm Steve Ledoux. I'm town manager here in Acton, and today we're talking about our special town meeting, which will be on February 2nd at 7 p.m. at the Acton-Boxborough Regional High School Auditorium. With me today is Dr. Ed McQuillan. Ed is the superintendent of the Minuteman Regional Technical School District. We have one article at town meeting on February 2nd, and that will be to see if the town will approve an amended regional agreement for Minuteman Tech. So Ed is here to talk about that today. So I guess, Ed, before we get into it, maybe you could just explain briefly the type of programs that Minuteman Tech offers.
Sure, Steve. Thanks for having me here. I appreciate the opportunity. Minuteman is a regional vocational technical school district formed in the late 70s, opened up in 71. We serve 16 communities and a number of students from out of district.
I'm not going to ask you to name all the communities. I know you're good.
Yeah, well, that's a quiz at the end.
Okay.
We've been, over the last few years, we've been working closely with our member towns around the regional agreement. But the regional agreement is the document that binds the school together. And the school itself offers currently 19 vocational technical programs, Chapter 74 approved. Our students are involved in a number of different community projects in Acton and the surrounding communities. We have a full set of rigorous academics. Our students, of course, pass the MCAS like every other high school student. We have AP classes, art, music, sports. But our students gain a competitive edge in that they're engaged in a vocational technical program that they're interested in. We help students answer two very basic questions. What do I love to do, and what do I do well? And we connect that to career majors, college majors, and they spend 3.5 years studying academics that are related to those vocational technical training areas and becoming skilled in their craft, whether it be a typical trade area such as carpentry, plumbing, electrical, welding, or in some of our other areas of biotechnology, environmental technology, robotics, automation, engineering. So it's a real robust set of offerings that has served students in Acton well for over 40 years.
Yeah, and I think, if memory serves me from the preliminary assessment for FY17, we have about 30 kids from Acton, I think, participating.
Yeah, right now there's about 30 students from Acton. It's been as high as 55, as low as 25 over the last 20 years or so.
Exactly. So you talk about a regional agreement. It kind of establishes the governance of how those 16 towns are going to work together and all that. So you talk a little about the history of the regional agreement with Minuteman?
Sure. As I mentioned, it was formed in 1970. There were originally 12 towns in the district. In 1980, I believe they added 4 more towns to our current 16. And other than adding those towns in 1980, there's been no revisions to the regional agreement over the last 40 years. So the agreement is that document that binds the 16 towns together. It describes how voting occurs, how members that represent the towns are appointed, how capital costs are assessed, how operating costs are assessed, how people and communities join the district, how they depart the district. And for the last 6 years, we've been working on trying to revise the agreement to bring it into this century and be reflective of what the towns have been asking for in regards to those aspects of a regional agreement.
Yeah, so the regional agreement really hasn't been touched in almost 36 years, apparently.
Has not been touched.
No. So how do the latest revisions come about that are being proposed in front of the in front of town meeting this February 2nd?
Well, it's been a long process with a lot of folks involved. We first formed a regional agreement task force in January of 2010. That task force was made up of selectmen, FinCom members from a variety of the 16 member towns. And we worked for about 2 years developing a set of changes to the agreement. Around 2012, there was some objections to how capital costs were going to be assessed by some of the smaller sending communities, and that effort really was stalled. And then in 2013, we applied for and received a $50,000 grant from the administration and finance component of the state. That $50,000 grant was used to hire consultants. We hired the Mass Association of Regional Schools, and we also had some representatives from NESDEC, the New England School Development Council. We reformed the committee to look at the regional agreement. We had better representation, I believe. We had a more diverse representation from different folks within different communities. We also invited some of our larger non-member sending communities to join in this discussion, because part of the revisions to the regional agreement are meant to be more attractive for towns that are not associated with a vocational school to join Minuteman. So over a period of 2 more years, a set of amendments were developed and approved by the school committee, approved by the Department of Education, and put before town meetings in 2014, I believe. That effort, 10 of the 16 towns approved it, 5 communities didn't vote on it, and 1 voted it down. And we left it there. And as we've gotten closer to a MSBA building project, the call from the sending towns to revise some of the older aspects of the regional agreement were heard by the school committee. In this past June, a subgroup of that second regional agreement task force began meeting and came up with a further set of amendments that the selectmen have really carried forward in the 16-member towns, and have come to a consensus agreement. And these are the revisions that we have before the Acton Town meeting in a couple of weeks. I really have to commend the selectmen and members of different FinComs and warrant committees that are represented in the 16 towns for their ability to come to an agreement. And on December 21st, the Minuteman School Committee approved all of these revisions and added them to the previous revisions. And so what we have before you is a set of minor revisions to the last revisions that I believe are going to serve the district very well going forward.
So what makes you think they'll be more acceptable than, as you say, the time we went through a year or 2 ago to try to revise it?
Well, it depends where you sit, what town you're from. They're acceptable for different reasons, but generally speaking, the smaller sending communities, and we have 5 or 6 member districts that send 3 or 4 students a year, that's it. They adjusted the capital assessment formula, which had charged the minimum of 5 students for a capital project. That has now been reduced to 1 student. So the smaller communities are paying for the students they send. Okay. And that was a big win for a lot of the smaller communities such as Weston and Dover and Lincoln. In addition, there are some changes in how a rolling average of enrollment is used to develop the annual assessments. This takes the spikes out of the assessments on an annual basis. You've known some years we've had, 15 more students go to from Acton, and it was a huge increase in the assessment from one year to the next.
Actually, we got a pretty good spike for FY17, if memory serves me.
You do, yes. So once the new agreement is in place, that'll take those spikes and dips out. In addition, the capital formula being revised, in addition to the rolling average, we've also ensured that non-member communities will be participating in the capital costs of a new building. When the regional agreement was first discussed in 2010, that was the #1 issue of all the 16-member towns. Between 40 and 50% of our population for the last quarter of a century has come from outside the district. And we serve those kids well, and they're great to have in the school. They add to the diversity, not only socioeconomically and racially, but they add to the health and well-being of the school. It's a very different, vibrant place to be because of all of the kids that come from so many different backgrounds. And I value that, and that's important. However, I clearly understand how the towns would be concerned that we're building a school for 600 kids and maybe 300 of them are from out of district, they're not paying their fair share.
Exactly.
We couldn't go forward with that. In the regional agreement, that has been addressed, that it's required that non-residents pay for the capital cost, and they'll pay an average of what the other members pay.
Okay.
But in addition to that, what happened in 2015, we worked hard with the state legislature, with the Commissioner of Education, and there is now a regulation in place that was put in place in March of 2015, debated and voted on by the State Board of Education in February of 2015, that now states that the Department of Ed will in fact develop an out-of-district tuition that adds on a capital fee.
Excellent.
So that's been addressed forever, but it's been reinforced in the new regional agreement.
Very good.
And probably one of the more interesting things about these revisions is that there are several smaller communities that are looking at leaving the district and becoming non-member towns. These are traditionally towns that have sent us a very small number of students. Some of the communities have looked at other vocational schools as an option, and they've had various reports come out with various findings. But in this particular revisions to the regional agreement, those towns that want to exit and their town meeting approves the new regional agreement and the town meeting approves a withdrawal article that will occur in 7 of the 16 communities, then that town would be able to withdraw effective July 1st,
Okay.
2017.
Okay. Okay, very good. So we've not really talked about the building project, but once again, that's been another thing that's been kind of lingering, and we've had the
Yes.
whole debate about the size of the school because of the tuitioned-in students. Is there a linkage between the changes in this regional agreement and the school building project?
I think the regional agreement lays a great foundation, no pun intended, for continuing with the MSBA in a building project. And we submitted our schematic designs on December 1st. We expect the MSBA Board of Directors to approve our schematic design on January 27th. Once that is approved, we have 120 days to secure local approval for the building project. And in the minds of many select boards, this regional agreement is definitely tied to the approval of a new building project.
Yeah. So that explains why you had requested that the towns hold a special town meeting on the regional agreement before March 1st, which is, as you say, you've got some meetings, some nights in February, you've got multi-town meetings going on.
Yes.
This. Yeah. Fortunately not. We were the only one on February 2nd, I believe.
Well-placed meeting, thank you.
Okay, no problem. What do you think are the key reasons that voters should support the change in the regional agreement?
Well, there's a lot of opportunity in this warrant article that is really unique to the history of Minuteman. We have an opportunity to create what I would call a user-friendly regional agreement. The district ought to be made up of towns that want to be members. And if there are towns that are seeking to leave, they ought to have that debate on town meeting, and this agreement supports that democratic process of towns looking at vocational technical education, their options and opportunities under this agreement, under a new agreement with a new school building.
Okay. Would the changes in the regional agreement make it more attractive for some of these tuitioned-in communities to join the district?
From my conversations with a number of communities that have sent us large numbers of students for many, many years, Watertown, for instance, sends us 65 to 70 students a year, and they have for a number of years. They're not associated with any vocational district. They don't offer any vocational technical programs themselves. They have said, once this regional agreement is passed, come back and talk to us about becoming a member, because there are some incentives within the new agreement for members to join, where it takes a 4-year transition for them to pay their full capital obligation. This was consciously done in order to attract towns like Watertown. The City of Everett has expressed an interest in having vocational technical education available to its citizens. There's a number of opportunities there. They're not associated with any vocational technical school, nor do they offer any vocational programs. We only have about 5 or 6 students from there, but the mayor and I have had conversations, and again, he said, once you get this new regional agreement passed, let's talk again.
Awesome.
And then we have towns like Medford, Waltham, Cambridge, who have sent us a lot of students for a number of years. They offer their own vocational technical programs. We offer some that they don't. They may also look at joining Minuteman. Even though they have programs of their own, the cost of adding new programs is so significant now that they may look at it too. So I really see the opportunity to have the conversation. By passing this warrant article in all 16 towns, as superintendent, I'm going to have a clear message from my member towns about the regional agreement. It demonstrates cohesiveness, consensus building, and an effectiveness to our district that frankly hasn't been seen for a number of years.
And it seems like the key dates are going to be that if all 16 towns pass, the regional agreement effective dates July 1 of 17.
That's correct.
And similarly withdrawal for the communities
Yes.
that withdraw or the 17th, or excuse me, FY7 or July 1 of 17. And then I assume the state Department of Ed will have to approve the revised agreement.
The process for having a full regional agreement implemented is all 16 towns must pass it. We collect all the certified votes through your town clerk. We send those to the Department of Education. The commissioner has until December of 2016 to approve the new regional agreement. And then the regulations state that the July following the approval of the commissioner is when the new regional agreement is put into place.
Okay. So what happens if a town withdraws and they currently have, some students going to the region? What happens to those students?
Great question. All the students that are currently enrolled and will be applying for next year are held harmless by the actions of the adults. They will have full right as a member district student to complete their 4 years at Minuteman in whatever vocational technical area they select. So there's no impact on the kids. The kids are going to have the access right through till they graduate.
Okay. So what would the policy, now let's assume a few towns do withdraw from the district, but they want to tuition their kids in. What is that process going to be like?
Well, in the short term, there will be room at Minuteman for those students. So we've had approved by the Department of Ed and by the school committee a framework of an agreement that we would have with a town withdrawing or with a town that's a non-member. And that framework is entitled an intermunicipal agreement, an IMA. That intermunicipal agreement will provide the basics for students to apply, how the town would be charged. It would outline the capital fee that non-member town, whether they were a member prior or not, would be paying for their capital fee. If a student was on an IEP, we'd be describing those additional costs. The non-member community would also have to pay their own transportation, which is now included in the Minuteman assessment. And that IMA would probably be in effect for 3 years and no longer. I'm anticipating as the new school is approved and we go forward with the design development process and construction actually begins, that the school, which is going to be smaller than it is now, will be full and there'll be a waiting list. If you look at the other 4 brand new vocational technical schools that have been built in the Commonwealth in the last 10 years, Worcester Tech was about 10 years ago, virtually every single one of these vocational technical schools has a waiting list of several hundred students.
One of the things I remember from, all the meetings we've had over the last 4 years with the town managers and all that, is that the Commission of Education sets the out of district tuitions, and I know he's somewhat, I guess, addressed the issue of the capital cost now, but my recollection from our meetings is that there's been a continual drop in the out-of-state tuition set by the commissioner.
Yeah.
How do we deal with that in the future, given with this proposed regional agreement
It's a good
change?
point. There's, as you said, the Commissioner of Education sets the tuition rate, the non-resident tuition rate, for all vocational technical schools in the state. That rate is based upon our submission of our end-of-year report the previous year. And it was capped at 150% of the statewide foundation tuition rate. Basically what that means is that there's a state average that is spent per pupil in vocational technical education. Let's just say, for instance, it was $16,000. Previously, the commissioner would set the maximum rate at 150% of that. So $22,000 in some places. Our rate was set around $18,500 was the highest it had been set. Through basically the political efforts of a large number of traditional superintendents that have been sending a large number of students as non-members, the commissioner agreed to, over a 4-year period, reduce that out-of-district tuition rate from 150% of foundation down to 125% of foundation. So the foundation rate grows a little bit every year. So our tuition rate we're anticipating next year will be about $17,000. Currently it's about $18,300. So so we are losing non-resident tuition revenue, which does reduce member district assessments. And that's a consequence of the decision that was made based upon the input from the 16 towns to build a smaller school. We will not have the seats we do now for non-resident students.
I think you have on your website what the financial impact will be with the new model, given the new agreement, and also what happens if you talked up to 7 towns might withdraw, assuming this all goes through. How do you see that financial impact with the remaining 9 communities?
As you mentioned on our website, if you look under regional agreement on the left-hand side, you'll see some of these spreadsheets where we've tried to analyze the worst-case scenario, in my mind. If 7 towns leave, what's the impact, the financial impact of the capital project on the remaining 9 towns? And we have a summary sheet there. Overall, because those 7 towns send so few students, the range of impact is between 3 and 6%. And I don't know where Acton falls in that, but I imagine it's around 4.5%, 5%.
Yeah, I think so.
So in other words, if all those 7 towns leave, the impact on Acton would be about a 4.5 to 5% increase in your annual capital costs of the project.
Okay, and maybe just mention what your website is. I know you have a lot of information about not only the change in the regional agreement, but the capital. So just for our viewers, if you could mention.
Yeah,
your
it's
website.
www.minuteman.org. There's a lot of great stuff on there. If your students are interested in applying to Minuteman and they haven't expressed an interest yet, we have an online application process now that's working very well. We have a couple of shadow days coming up. If you have an 8th grader or a 9th grader who's looking at Minuteman, this allows them to spend a day in 2 program areas with another student exploring something they may be interested in, and you can find that information on the website. We also have an extensive amount of documentation around the new project, MSBA formats, MSBA spreadsheets, as well as some PowerPoint summaries of where we're at with the process and the cost of the building and the new programs in the building and the very exciting new educational program plan. Also, the regional agreement is highlighted there. We took some of the ancient history off, and now it's all current information about the regional agreement, and folks can read a redlined version or a final clean version, as well as see the impacts of operating assessments of the new agreement on your individual town on those spreadsheets. So I'd encourage you to go there and take a look at what's there. We're also Steve having a meeting tomorrow morning,
I'll be there.
Thursday morning at 7:30. We have about 30 folks coming, just to review the warrant articles, review the questions that you're asking, and getting some clarification. We'll have our attorney there to answer some of the nuanced questions around the legal implications of some of these actions. But it's really important that Acton residents come to town meeting, get a quorum, and approve the new regional agreement.
And just for our viewers, also on the town website, www.acton-ma.gov, we have some of the similar documents that Ed has been talking about. We have a summary of the article, we have some frequently asked questions, we do have a red line version of the regional agreement for viewers as well.
Great.
I'd like to thank Ed for taking the time to talk about our town meeting that's coming up. And once again, it's February 2nd at 7 o'clock at the Acton Boxborough Regional Auditorium. It's the one and only article that night, and it is very important that everybody come, because we do have a significant number of children that do go to Minuteman, and it'd be important for their future as well. So I'd like to thank everybody for watching, and we'll see you at town meeting. Thank you.